In the world of self-development, you might have come across this concept of inventing a 2.0 version of yourself, stepping into your better self and then having all of your dreams and stuff and goals come true. When in reality, that's usually not what happens. And if you are someone that has that skill of stepping into this grander version of this better version of yourself, this 2.0 version, and you are able to make that change in such a short amount of time, well then please reach out, because I think you should really be teaching, because that is awesome. If you're like me, reality of that concept is that depending on how big or how much of a change that 2.0 version is, it's going to require a lot more than just, hey, I'm there and look at me, now I've changed. So in this video, I'm going to be diving into this whole concept of that 2.0 version of yourself, why there is actually truth to it, but however, why it's oftentimes not being met, and what we can do. Look at this from a different perspective to see how you can actually start even implementing changes towards that. The reason why I think a lot of us do this version 2.0 is because we're unsatisfied with the current state and where we're at, and we're desiring this thing that is going to get us there. And we have this idea of, when I get there, I will then become XYZ. And so there's this notion that when I get to this 2.0 version, I'm going to then attract these things into my life and get there. And what we're oftentimes doing when we do that is we're looking for particular emotions and feelings internally. Now, whether the vehicle for you to get to that 2.0 is starting your own business, it's getting into a relationship, it's changing the way you think about yourself, whatever that vehicle is to get you there, you can always look at the underlying emotions to find what the real drive is. We normally, when we also talk about that, is we usually tell people, hey, look, I'm looking to lose weight, but really deep down, if you start to look at it on the emotional level, it is to get away from the feelings of worthlessness. It is to self-love a little bit more. It is a deeper emotion that's usually driving that intention to get there. So we have that intention that is set up. That's that 2.0 version. This is why we usually take it into account. You might come across a lot of some influencer or whatever is talking about your particular pain points, and you get sucked into it, and they're like, the way out is the 2.0 you, not forget about the 1.0. And there is truth to this. If you can stay present moment to moment in recreating this 2.0 version of yourself, and you stay present to it moment to moment basis, then you have a much higher chance of actually converting that version into that new desired version of you that you're looking to do. That is the truth of it. That is literally how you change. However, reality is that it's much more difficult than that. And what I mean by this is that I like to look at it in terms of consciousness and unconsciousness, right? So we have 95% of us is on a daily basis, 95% of us is unconscious, and then you have the 5% that is actually conscious. And most of that is actually just a repeat of the previous day and the day before that and the day before that. So if we start to look at our perspective around the 5% of consciousness, okay, so within my day I have this 5 or whatever, you can even say 10%, whatever you want to call it. Let's just say 5% for now. Within that 5%, I have about 1% of that time I'm actually conscious to my intention of stepping into this 2.0 version of me. So what's actually happening is that out of that 1%, of that 5%, of that 100%, I am setting an intention of this new direction. So what I am doing is I'm actually dragging all of my previous actions, behaviors, thoughts, patterns, the works, all of my baggage with me with this new intention, and this one little measly, like maybe even 0.00% or 0.1%, whatever, of your day-to-day tasks is like, I'm going into this 2.0 version of me with all of this baggage with me. You are most likely to just encounter a struggle, encounter some stressful times, or an emotion is going to wear off, and you go right from your 2.0 back into your 1.0, back into the familiar self. And you start looking and you're like, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what that was, 2.0. You know what? 3.0 version of me is going to work this time, I swear. And then rinse and repeat the same thing over and over again. One of the reasons, another reason why, I mean, I just covered one of the reasons, but another reason in which this 2.0 version of us fails is that I truly believe is the concept of fears. And it's that fear that we have of the unknown and the fear of the change. Now, I'm going to dive into fear particularly. You see, oftentimes I find people talk about, oh, well, you just have a fear of doing this, you just have a fear of doing that, just get over your fear and you'll be good. However, I find that fear is a lot more dynamic and complex than just getting over my fear. You see, for most people, we have a hard time even identifying what most of our fears are, myself included. It's very challenging if I'm not very present to find the different ways in which fear appears. And so this gave me kind of a new concept, a new way of engaging and thinking about fear. You see, fear to me is this overarching umbrella, that kind of like a country. And within the country, you have different states, provinces, counties, whatever you want to call it. But there are different things. And so to call all of them the same thing, like all of the states in the US, the same thing, like Florida, the same as Washington, they're not the same. Usually there's a different bit of like a localized culture to the area, which impacts the people that are there and which impacts the thoughts, behaviors, and actions. There are some similarities, but overall you could say that they tend to be different people. So taking the same concept of the countries and the counties and applying it to fear, where fear is the country, and you might have a different fear when you're swimming along and you bump into a shark. You might have a different fear that comes up when you're public speaking, a different fear when you're meeting new people. Whatever the thing is, I find that there are some similarities of fear within everything, but more often than not, there's a different flavor to the fear. You see, the flavor of fear with the shark is, to me, very, very different than the flavor I have with meeting new people. Let's look at it from like a different perspective. So I have a particular fear, okay, and we'll call this the fear, we'll call it let's say the nervous fear. So when this fear shows up in my body, I tend to shake. I tend to feel that. So I'm like, okay, so I've got this nervousness fear, and there is another fear that tends to appear when, let's call it the back of the neck. The back of neck fear, and okay, let's do a third one here. We'll do a anger fear. You see, if you're trying to distinguish these individual fears within your body, they'll be appearing most likely in a different way. However, here's how they all interrelate. My thing is that, okay, we got a shark in the water. And I know that there's some people that are not really afraid of sharks in the water. I am terrified of these things. There is public speaking. And let's say another example that is meeting new people. Meeting new people. Okay, so if we were to dissect the actual fear, because once we actually start to change our perspective about a particular issue, I'm going to be diving deep into it. And as I change the perspective, the lens in which I'm looking at this, I start to gain a little bit more awareness and a little bit more inquiry as to what this is. And this is literally usually the first and most powerful step in actually working with your fears and actually not being at the cause of them and allowing you to get that power back into yourself. So shark, let's look at it. So if we look at a bar chart, maybe when I encounter a shark, I probably have, let's say this is the fear chart, the fear bar, okay, fear bar. Within my fear bar, I have a back of the neck fear. Okay, so this one's appearing as black. The nervous fear is going to be green, and the anger fear is going to be red, okay? I'm probably going to have, let's say, out of this, let's say 60% is the neck fear. I'm going to probably have, let's say 40% of the nervous fear, and then the remainder is going to be an anger fear, all right? Now, I'll do one more example here. Meeting new people. I don't know. I don't really have this particular fear, but whatever it is. Let's say back of the neck is 20%, and let's say all of a sudden you just really don't like people or meeting people. All right, so I got a whole solid 80% of anger, fear up in here. Okay, look at all these markers. All right, so you can look at this fear bar and this fear bar, and you can start to see that, hey, this fear is actually appearing differently in my body than when I'm meeting people. And that's because that I have different forms of fear coming in. So it's a different flavor. Now, if I look at how to actually start to engage with this process and change my relationships to fear, here's that first step that I think that works effectively in actually starting to get you moving forward towards that intention that you set up, that 2.0 version of yourself. Okay, so let's say for me, and I'll use myself as an example here. For me, it was making new videos. Okay, and within making new videos, I had this nervous fear. Okay. Oh, yeah, we got color combos now. All right, I had nervous fear. Now, there were other fears in my life that I know of and that I don't know of. Okay? And I can consciously tell you that this nervous fear is one of the strongest, actually, or has been one of the strongest indicators in my life. It's been showing up the most when making these videos. I also know that this fear appears in a variety of different fears, but at a different percentage. It just seems to me that this is about like an 80-90% when I was doing these. And what's happened over this course of making these videos, these last, I don't know, a bunch of videos that I made, what's been happening is I have been engaging with this particular fear. This is what's been showing up in my consciousness, okay? And I've been engaging with that fear and changing the relationship to it. You see, I've been able to pinpoint what this fear is like, what it's doing, and what it's trying to indicate to me. And instead of entering into a state of overwhelm and like engaging the fear and having it overwhelm me, I've been able to meet it close enough so that I can start to change the relationship that I have with it and start to say, hey, normally you are in the driver's seat. Normally you do take over. I feel overwhelmed and I want to go do something else. However, I am now going to be in the driver's seat. I want you in the passenger seat. Indicate all these things to me. I can assess them, but I'm going to be driving it. And as I started to do that, I could see the transformations in my own videos and how I can engage and how I can talk and what I'm doing and what I'm saying. And I could see how this fear, which used to have an overwhelming response in my body and just keep me from doing it, and I would go into some sort of distraction just to get away from this whole thing, it's now been reduced. The severity of it has been reduced. And in doing so, by reducing this fear that I have in it, I think it's always going to be there. Instead of it being like 80%, it's down to like a 10% around these videos. So there is still that nervousness, fear, and I thank you for that because, hey, maybe it's telling me something that I'm not quite aware of. But by reducing this fear, I've also reduced how I engage with this fear in other areas of my life. So let's say here, we're talking about the green. Let's say there was some green in here. All of a sudden, the green is not as strong as it was before. So now I can say that my overall fear bar has actually reduced. And so by engaging with one of these particular fears, it interrelates into other particular areas. And maybe that this particular fear was around a challenge that I was looking to do, but there was so much fear that it created such a resistance and a barrier of entry that I just could not overcome. However, when I dealt with this fear, and I started to engage in a different way, it's lowered my barrier of entry for this fear, and I started to engage with that fear. I started to actually engage in that particular activity. And I've noticed this with taking on different challenges. Like for myself, has been fasting. I've been going on multiple day fasts, which used to terrify me of not eating for a couple of days. It was very scary. But I started doing these videos. I used that surge, that confidence and that trust in myself and that barrier resistance to actually take on a fast, and now I'm fasting, and this is actually it's going to be I think something that's going to be that I'm going to start doing quite frequently. So as you do this, as you engage and change the parts of you of the fear that you're engaging with, you're actually changing the relationships to these fears. As you do that, who are you becoming? You are becoming that version, that 2.0 version that you initially set that intention for. I mean, if it's all aligned, if you're like, hey, in order to get to here, I need to tackle this, and this. And now what you're doing is you're taking it in increments and steps. I'm now focusing on 50 different things all right off the bat, and I have to consume not only the energy to suppress all of my previous baggage and emotions, but also the energy that's required to then take on these new ways of being, these new ways of thinking, these new ways of acting. And so by taking it on into smaller chunks and working with that fear, it starts to impact a bunch of different areas, which then I'm more likely to take another step and another step and another step. And ultimately, I am becoming that 2.0 version of myself. I don't have to then say, hey, I am the 2.0. I just am in that point. And this is, if you take it into bite-sized chunks, it works, I find, a lot more efficiently, a lot more effectively than just trying to change everything all at once. So with that, I conclude this video. Just to summarize, we have a variety, the 2.0 versions of us, that whole intention behind that. Yes, there is truth to that, but but realistically, it's oftentimes not attained because we tend to just try and change everything with that, or we try and change too much of what we're capable of. And if we're not conscious to it, staying present to it in the moment basis, we most likely are going to have a tendency to step back into our old familiar states of being. And we talked about the different fears that and how they engage, and the different fear bars that you have with different things, and how it's kind of potentially interlinked to other fears that you have, and how focusing on one particular area, you're not diverting your attention on a bunch of different fears, but you're diverting your extra attention towards one. And in doing so, you're actually reducing the amount of resistance in another thing, which now is something that you can take. And as you start to transform these individual fears and these individual tasks, you are becoming that 2.0 version of yourself. And so that's how I find is the most effective way that's worked for me. And you can take it from there. All right, thanks for watching this video.